This is the Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, an architect, partner at the office, and of course, host of the show. And today, our guest is Andrew Bernheimer. Andy is the founding principal of Bernheimer Architecture, also known as BA. And with Andy, we talk about his office creating the first ever union in architecture. So those who are in the profession have been following the news of the last number of years of a series of unions that have been attempted to be created within architecture practices. And within his office was the first one ever created. And so we talked to him about some of the specific details and practicalities of how it works, what it meant to him as the business owner to have a union formed, and the positive benefits of it, some of the challenges they had, how the negotiations take place, and then toward the end, Andy's larger thoughts about the profession and also in the academic space of what it means to create healthy work environments and productive work environments in both areas. This was a fascinating conversation. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it, and I hope you enjoy. Sponsors. Dear architects, design leaders, and founders redefining the industry, if you want to shape not only buildings, but the business behind them, this is your moment. Future London Academy's Executive MBA takes you inside the boardrooms of Pentagram, Uber, Zaha Hadid Architects, and Google, where you'll master finance, strategy, and operations from the people who already excel at them. Study along peers transforming the industry worldwide and do it all in just 9 intensive weeks over 1 year. Between London and California. The program is award-winning, transformative, and crafted for design and architecture leaders with 15 or more years of experience. If you're ready to grow your impact, apply now by tapping the Future London Academy link in our show notes. This is the Second Studio with myself and Andy. Here we go. We've been going back and forth via email for a few years about this subject. Take us all the way back to when did this idea first come around within your office, and how did it start?
So that's a very good question. Part of it is the answer will be me speculating because I wasn't involved in the organizing of the union because I'm the owner. What I do know is that my own interest in labor dates back to before the union was formed at BA. There are a couple of people in my office who had been active in something called the architecture lobby, which was started by a retired faculty member at Yale named Peggy Deemer and others. And a couple of the people in my office who are now actually in management and principals were, members of and active in the architecture lobby. The lobby was an organization that sought to, I think, examine issues of labor and equity in both academics and in the workplace. And so I had my curiosity piqued by the efforts of the lobby, though I wasn't a really active member. A couple people here were. And I think that started to create interest, generally speaking, within the labor of the practice in organizing. So that is a little bit about kind of the foundational interest in it. In terms of the organizing, I can take you through a little bit of a timeline of how I found out about it. So let's see. It's 2026. So now I'm in the process of like trying to remember the years that this all happened. It was, let's see, I want to say it was 4 years ago. That sounds like a start of a presidential speech. 4 years ago, at the end of the school year, I finished my teaching. I teach at Parsons at the new school. We have our commencement ceremony and graduation ceremonies in mid-May. And I think it was a day after my last engagement at school, I got a letter from the staff at BA that they had formed a union and they were asking for voluntary recognition. So that was 4 years ago in 2022, in late May of 2022. So that was when I found out that they had been organizing. I believe that they had spent several months all speaking to each other and understanding what it meant to form a union. They had talked to Architectural Workers United, AWU, which is one of the grassroots, the grassroots group that's helping firms organize. And they were also in contact with the the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers,
Yep.
IAMAW, which was the union that they became and were affiliated with. So that's when I found out that they were organizing 4 years ago, just about 4 years ago.
So for some context, how large is your office, or was your office at that
The
time?
office at the
Like how many people?
time was, I want to say it was 21 people,
Oh, it's
uh,
big. Okay,
plus
yeah,
me.
that's a lot of people.
Yeah. So, it wasn't one of these 6-person firms. It wasn't a 60 or 80-person firm. It was a small to small to medium size, I would say.
Yeah.
Like we're not giant. But 21, 22 people is,
Hmm.
it's an
It's a
office.
body of
Yeah, it
people.
is. It is. And the letter came from everybody. That was, I think, one of the interesting things. Actually, that's not true. It came from everybody but two of us. It came
Okay.
from everyone but me, obviously, and the other person who was not a signatory to the letter was the one person in the office who's not an architect, who does financial related issues.
Sure.
So she had access to information that excluded her from being part of a workers
Yep.
union.
Yep.
And so it was from 20 of the other 20 people in the office, everyone, including people who were senior here. That was I think one of the interesting things for me, is that the letter came from everybody. So they had obviously all been speaking to each other.
Is and so talk us through that. So the from the outsider's perspective, so I know a little bit about unions, but just like barely anything, and I think most listeners who are architects or non-architects also don't know much about it. But the assumption that we have is that if you're a business owner and you have all your employees sign this thing, that it means that you've done something wrong, or that
Mm-hmm.
you would be, the ego would be like, well, why the fuck is this happening? I mean, I know you. We've conversed. You're a stand-up guy. But like, just talk us through. Were you kind of like, were you like offended, or I don't know?
No, okay. So let's see. I'm trying to think of some other context that I can establish to give you a sense. Um, One was that obviously there had been some efforts in New York City at
Yeah.
other firms to unionize. There was one high profile effort that had not worked, did not succeed.
Hmm.
Um, One of the people who actually had led that effort at this other practice was someone I had hired not long, several months beforehand.
Hmm.
So I hired somebody, and I had been talking to this person for a couple of years about coming to work here. Someone who was friends with one of the senior people at the office,
Hmm.
and someone who's an excellent architect, and who I hired knowing that they were involved in the unionizing effort at this other firm. So
Hmm.
I knew someone was very, very labor interested in organizing, and it was something that I actually had thought
Yeah.
um, about unionization. So I wasn't completely naive to the possibility of this happening at my practice.
Yeah.
Now, I think you raise a really good question about, like, why do people unionize, right? Under what parameters and what contexts is unionization beneficial, and what can it help abate or alleviate? What can it help solidify and strengthen? And I think there's one of the mythologies that I had to sort of learn about myself, but also which I think I knew a little bit about, maybe the untruth of the mythology, was that the only place that you should unionize, or the only places that do unionize, are places where things are shitty, right?
Right. Right.
And I think that is a very understandable and very common um, way to process the news that something or some place is organizing, right?
Hmm.
Like those people must have it bad. They need to fight back, right? I think that's the narrative that is very common, and I think it's many times true, but it's certainly not always true. Um, so that was something. When I found out about the immunization, my first response was uh, surprise, not a surprise like, how did this ever happen? It
Right.
was more surprise, like it just was something brand new that happened at my practice, right? It was not a surprise like someone sucker punches you, which is a different
Hmm.
kind of surprise because it wasn't painful in the slightest. It was more like I've never had a surprise party, so I don't know if this is the right metaphor. But I
Yeah.
think when you maybe when you walk through that door and you're surprised to see all the people there, like that kind of surprise, it's not,
Right.
maybe there's a little bit of embarrassment, maybe there's a little bit of happiness,
Hmm.
that so many people are interested in you. Um, and so there was surprise in a way that it happened. And I think part of that surprise, David, is because there weren't any. Like, it's, I have to
Yeah.
say, it's a very strange feeling to think that something happens that might be the first time it's ever happened to
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
And that's something to process, right? Because
Hmm.
I knew there were no other unions in any other firms.
Yeah.
I knew that the only time it had been tried, it did not succeed.
Hmm.
I knew that if this was a process that I was interested in engaging, which I was interested in engaging it, that there was a chance that it was, I don't want to say historic to sound pompous, but it was going to be the first one kind of ever in at least the last
Yeah.
100 years.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there is a kind of surprise and a bit of a shock to that, but not a shock in the way where I'm like, what's gone wrong here? What do I need to change to make this better?
Right.
Though that is actually part of what you discuss. Like
Sure.
that's the reality. That's a fact that people are trying to make things better by doing this.
So, and I'm sure we'll get to this more, but was part of your thinking like, well, if you guys want to improve stuff, just come talk to me? Like, why do we have to go through
Yeah.
this
So
formal apparatus?
yeah, so one of the first things I did after getting this letter was I talked to a few people, right? I talked to a couple of colleagues. So let me take a step back. When I got the letter, I was a little bit surprised. And then I sort of moved into excitement, because it had been something that I had been thinking about and what it would mean if it happened.
Hmm.
Again, because I had hired someone who had been part of an organizing effort. I had, if you had asked me, if you'd asked me the day before I got the letter, if people at my firm were going to unionize, I probably would have said, yes, I think it will happen at my practice. I don't say,
Hmm.
I might say that in hindsight, but I think my answer would have been yes. If you had
Yeah.
said, when are they going to unionize? My answer would have been, I have no idea. It could be,
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have even said in the next month or tomorrow for sure. But I might have said in the year, 2 years, maybe within
Right.
the next couple of years. Like I didn't think about timescales and I didn't think about immediacy, but I think I would have said yes. I think
Hmm.
this place will unionize. Um, so the first thing I did was I pretty rapidly had to understand like what it meant. Right. I did some Google searches. I was like, what happens when your firm unionizes? But there's no precedent.
I was gonna say,
There's the
well,
generic rules of like what can you do
yeah.
when a workplace unionizes. So a I spoke to a college classmate who has a unionized shop, in a different industry, but a construction related industry. I
Hmm.
spoke to a couple of other architects, to ask them what they thought. Like, what
Yeah.
does it mean? Like, what would it mean if I did it? Um, I spoke to my parents. Um, little history. My father, his family business was a printing and mailing, outfit in Boston. So he had a plant, with printing presses. I worked there one summer in college, working lithography, working, you know, the offset printers, inking things, making plates. I worked on what's called a guillotine, which is a big paper cutter, which is the single most scary piece of equipment I've ever encountered in my life. Having been on construction sites, that says a lot, but literally a guillotine.
It's literally a guillotine.
It can cut through, it's like 2,000 sheets of paper, like
Oh
with the
gosh.
rest of the pedal. So it's anyways. So I called my dad. My dad and my mom. My dad and mom are old-fashioned Massachusetts liberals, and I called my dad and I said, because he had run his family business for many years, and I said, so I got this letter, and my staff is asking me to recognize him as a union, and I thought my dad would say, "That's amazing, that's great, like you should do it," right? Like good liberal person, and he said the same thing you did, which is he said, well, why would they need to do that? Why don't you just talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
Like what do you need a union for? What do they need a union for?
Right.
So I got that question and I spoke to an attorney, right? That's another thing.
Sure.
Because part of it was just like, what can't I do? Because there are all sorts of things you can't do, right? You can't promise things, you can't threaten, you can't try to coerce people. There are really important legal restrictions on what you can do as a business owner when your firm tries to unionize to protect people, right?
Sure.
And so I talked to an attorney. I asked a friend of mine if they had an attorney who wasn't the typical management labor attorney. And that was because there are a couple ways you can go with this. Because one, I had a fundamental interest in the unionization effort. And two, I didn't want to create animosity or an adversarial environment. I needed to learn from an attorney what could I do, what couldn't I do. But I also wanted someone who understood the interests of labor in that process.
Sure.
So I spoke to some friends of mine from college who were attorneys and got the name of someone who had worked on behalf of both management and labor, and spoke to this person about what it meant to unionize. And this person also asked me that same question right off the bat, which is why are they unionizing? Like, why do they need to? What do you want this? And why can't you give them what they might want without the union? Like, is it a structure you want in place because it has all sorts of ramifications? And it was good to work through that. So it was good to process through that. So I spent about 2 to 3 months learning, reading, talking to people, writing things down, writing my thoughts down, and also speaking to other people here because of the fundamental strangeness of the structure of the request for voluntary recognition, which was that it was everybody but 2 of us were requesting this, including people who, in my mind, were helping manage the practice, right? Mm-hmm. So we spent about 2 to 3 months with some meetings internally. And again, the process of this is there's like a bit of caginess because you can't say things, right? You're expressly forbidden from saying certain things. So you have to find language that doesn't run afoul of the law, but also tries to probe and understand what's happening.
So what would be an example of like something that you can't say, but naturally you'd want to?
I'm trying to remember like what some of the examples were. Like there are things like, you can't say things like, are you trying to get this? I can't ask things like, do you want more of this? Like, what do you really want? Like, there are ways to, it was just it felt like the requirements for security of the workforce, which is, again, really important, means that I have to be very careful about how I ask questions and what I say. Mm-hmm. And it took some time to figure out like how to craft conversations that would help me understand things without running afoul of those requirements.
I imagine that's a difficult thing to do in general, but also for a medium small architecture practice where everything's very intimate. Like,
we work together every day. Yeah, exactly.
And architecture is a very challenging, profession. You're talking about all kinds of stuff. Like your family is like an your office is like a family in a certain sense, and then now to have to phrase things a certain way would be an adjustment for sure.
Yeah, and also like what the paradox of we're in a profession, and also many of us teach and work in academia. We're in a world where we're used to talking, like maybe saying too much sometimes, or being really bluntly honest about what we're thinking, and then you have to sort of pre-filter that again for good reasons. But we spent those 2 to 3 months. For me, the biggest thing was understanding, because I after about, well, my first response, like 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in internally in my own brain, was like, I'm gonna do this. Like I had decided, I was trying not to again jump to a conclusion about what to do. So I really did have earnest conversations with a number of people quickly within the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of this happening. But I think at about that 2, 3, 4 week mark, which is pretty fast, I had decided that I had sort of decided that I was going to recognize the union.
Yeah. I'm guessing you have the capacity to also not do that and just
you can
shut it down.
You can. So there's another like offshoot of the discussion, which is like, well, if you're not the tactics of management dealing with labor, and again, I'm really oversimplifying this. One is you voluntarily recognize, which means you have a union, right? And then you start negotiating your CBA. You do it. That's done with. That's non-adversarial. That's right. You're recognizing them. It's just what it sounds like. You're saying, yes, I recognize you as union. Let's go to the next step. And the other side is you can't reject it. You can say, I won't recognize you. And you can push people to a vote, right? So pushing into a vote doesn't mean that it won't be a union, but the standard practice is you use the time between the time you tell them they need to vote on this and come up with a majority. There's a duration of time that passes between the moment of request and the moment of voting. And that time is typically used by management to sow discord, to pit people against each other, to slow the process down, to kind of stratify the groups and build opposition, right?
Sure.
And that was pretty much the least interesting thing you could have ever proposed to me, was to do
or
that.
projects stop, and then therefore, oh no, some people have to be let go for that kind of stuff.
So there was not even there. That wasn't even remotely, not even remotely uninteresting. I didn't even pass my mind to do that. Also, like, the simple fact was they were going to be a union because 20 people out of 22 were registered. This wasn't a giant practice where the lawyers could do their work if there was even interest in that happening. So I decided like a month in that I was going to recognize it, but there was one kind of stumbling block, which was like, what is the structure of the practice in a place that has a union, right? There's quite distinctly management and labor. Like, that's what you create. You create a divide. You can look at it as a negative, as a division, or you can look at it as a structure without judgment, which is sort of how I thought of it. But in the latter case, where it's a structure with two different parties, management and labor, there needs to be a structure within management. And so there are also, definitions about who qualifies as management and who qualifies as a member of the unit, the labor unit. And because everyone but the one person who wasn't an architect had signed on the letter, there were then further discussions between me and some others about what it really meant to be, were people managers? Like, were people who were seniors in the practice actually not really part of the unit? And were they? Yeah, they were management. Like, there needs, because how can management be just the owner and everyone else? There's the idea is that there's layers of management. And so probably the second month to third month of that 3 months lag between recognition from the time of the notification, part of that time, I'd say at least the last half of that, was trying to figure out um, how to create like a consensual support amongst the senior people that there was a management layer that they were part of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so
And
therefore
that
they would not be part of the
they would
labor
not be
force.
part of the union. And I
Yeah.
think there was an emotional component to that because a couple of the people who are in management now, who are principals at the practice, were instrumental in helping organize, right? And they were
Mm,
going to be part of the first thing that had
mm,
ever happened on the labor front in contemporary United States architectural practice. And so I think there was that's a hard thing to ask of someone, to say, hey, you were really important in organizing, but you can't be part of the group, right?
yeah.
That's effectively what I was saying without saying that
Yeah.
in those specific terms. And I have a lot of empathy for that sort of ask of someone,
Sure.
which is to spend a lot of time and emotional energy and commitment. Some of the people had, again, worked for the lobby and spent many, many months, if not years, thinking about what it would mean for architecture if there was a practice that had a union. And to be part of that was important, but then to be asked, in some ways told that that wasn't really how it would work if we did this,
Hmm.
because they were managers. That was a sensitive moment in my mind.
Yeah. I can appreciate that. And I think this is where also the nature of architecture, and I'm going to say smallish practices, there's this gray area because I've been at offices that are at your scale, been at offices that are smaller and bigger, and I've seen offices grow and shrink. And there's when you get to a certain point, like your size, you do naturally have to have some management, lest the office be just a shit show all the time. And
Well, it might still be a shit show, Dave.
like any good architecture practice.
Yeah.
And so, but there's this, or at least there's an attempt to create management, but it kind of needs to be there. So that was actually my first question was, how do you have everybody be part of the union? But in maybe, I mean, I don't know, I'm just thinking maybe it's actually quite an interesting and maybe more productive relationship because people who started the union ended up not being part of the union. Like
Yeah.
it probably creates a sense of fairness, implied fairness because of that.
Yeah. Um, I think that it was really helpful, and I think it was pretty brave of the people who are now in management to, I don't want to say accept, but have that conversation and come to an understanding. Again, whether they accepted it or not is not for me to say.
Sure.
I think it's implicit that they accepted it, but that they processed through what it would mean as a collective, and not just the collective of the unit, of the labor unit, but the collective of the entire practice, to
Yeah.
actually follow through and make this happen. I think that was an unselfish act
Mm.
and pretty brave of those people to both organize and then in a way step aside from that organization.
Hmm.
Um, and so did, I think it builds respect it built respect for those people, even as I acknowledge that it creates a division. And I
Sure.
think that was definitely another discussion we had, and there were differing opinions amongst some of the more senior people about, like, what does it mean to divide the office, right? And for me, there's the legal divide, right? There's the unit and there's management. So there's the contractual divide that exists, but there's also sort of implicit divides in any given office because of office structure, right? Senior versus junior,
Yeah.
project manager versus project designer, uh, non-architectural staff versus architectural staff. There's always some level of divide that exists. So the question is not like, how do we keep it from being undivided? Because there's always some level of division. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that in the negative division as a fractious term. I just mean there are layers, and there are different categories of types of people, from a professional standpoint. But what does it mean to divide the office structurally and legally while trying to maintain collaboration, transparency. And so there were discussions about that, but there was also like a lot of learning about like perception versus reality, about where are divisions existing. Are some of them not as good as they might, like, are the divisions actually because of difficulty and not because of the natural order of architectural offices? So
Right.
there was quite a bit of learning there too. And I think that goes back to the whole, like one of your first questions about like, why at an office does this happen? And my office had been and was and is a healthy work environment. Like it has, I won't say it's always been, I'm not saying it's perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But on the spectrum of architectural offices,
Yeah.
it had been, and it has been, a stable and supportive. And again, I'm saying this with owner's bias. So like everyone who's listening can
Well,
take
so
that.
yeah, but I think I have not worked at your office, so I can't say what it's like to be there. But you're right, though, on the spectrum of architecture offices, I've been at places that were horrible workplaces from in every metric you could think of, except for design quality. Design quality is always good, but like health, work-life balance, salary, treatment of employees, toxicity, all that's like bad. And I've been at offices that are the opposite, and that they're all high marks. And unfortunately, it's more common than we wish it were that offices don't perform in the way that they should. And a lot of the well-known architecture offices, we all know those are terrible places to work at. I'm not going to name them now. I'll do that in another episode. But like everyone in New York City knows this. Like it's not new information. But you have always had a reputation of being like the opposite of that at the school, at the like throughout New York. Everyone knows that like Andy's like the stand-up guy, and you guys do good work. So anyway, that's my attempt to support what you're saying. Thanks. For listeners who are like skeptical, I'm like, no, Andy's a good guy. This is not some shady individual we're having on the show.
But the thing is, David, like it's gratifying to hear that, and there is a degree where I know that we and I have run a safer, healthier office. And at the same time, the process still reveals places for improvement, right? Self-criticism and understanding, like, where did you maybe not do something nearly as well as you could? Where did you step on someone's toes? So, but in the realm of that original question, like why here, I do think that the people who are interested in helping labor establish a foothold and show that this could be done, and show that this could be done in a practice where it would not damage the practice, right? So that but I think that the people who organized were confident that they had my receptiveness to the organization, and that of any place where, well, they were working at the place, so not any place, but this was a place where we could show that this would succeed. Right. So that's different than we need to establish a union because the boss is treating us like shit.
Right.
And we're overworked and we're underpaid and we don't have benefits and we have no predictability and no job security. We're all at-will employees. Like that's not to say that those issues of health, welfare, job security, upward mobility, et cetera, were not of interest throughout the discussions and the negotiations. That's not to say that those were off the table or separate from anyone's interests. But I think the motivating factor, or a very strong motivating factor among many motivating factors, was if we do this here, we can prove that it works.
Was part of your decision to recognize the union informed by this larger perspective of the profession and witnessing the struggles the profession has with the workplaces not being great, and you thinking to yourself, like, I myself can help contribute to this larger effort And that's another part of the, one reason to say yes as opposed to not.
Yes, definitely. For me, it goes beyond just practice, and it moves backwards into the formative years of academic environments. Because I've been teaching for 25 years, and I've been a full-time faculty member at the new school since 2012. And you can see where it starts. You can see where you've had many people on your podcasts from all walks of the profession and academics, and you've probably heard the stories. You know the stories, you've lived them yourself. I did too. I perpetuated some of the bullshit in studio culture as I taught, over 25 years. It took me a long time, to be honest, to really think through critically what kind of environment I was creating and what kind of environment the schools are creating for students, and still see it when I go to other schools' reviews. And so for me, there was very much an interest in taking both what has happened at BA, but also bringing some of that back to where I teach and thinking holistically from the start of someone's life as a learning designer to the world of practice, that we need to make fundamental changes to how this profession works. So yes, there was a bit of pie in the sky mission driven interest in this, not just local business concerns and insulated, siloed. What's it like for BA? It was actually, I had thoughts that this would be able to cascade outward.
Yeah. So I'm scaling it down now. When you have meetings with the union leaders or representatives in the office, is it just like the management and them? Do you have to have like attorneys present? Like how does it I don't know. How does it work?
All right. So maybe, and you can cut me off at a certain point, because this might take a little bit of time. So you recognize the union, then they're a union, right? You file the forms with the NLRB. You explain who's in the union, who's not in the union. You recognize them, and then at that point, you have to start negotiating contract, right? So at the time of recognition, it's really just the big group of the people that you recognize within the union and the people who are left as management. Like it's pretty simple. It's not like a specific. There's not like the leadership group in the union, right? You then have to decide how you're going to get to actually having a collective bargaining agreement, which is the contract between the practice and the union.
Oh, that's the CBA.
That's the CBA. So
gotcha.
You have a union, but like, what does the union have? Basically, what you've done is you've effectively given them protections. They've gotten protections under the law relative to their union status. It's really important. But there are no terms of employment other than effectively the protections of what they have in place, their benefits, there's nothing that establishes, like we had an office handbook, which talked about hours of work and holidays, like
sure.
But there was no contract. So they have the new protections of a union, but they don't have a contract that establishes all their rights and the terms of their employment. So at that point, you then have to negotiate a contract, right? So that's the next step. So you recognize them, big moment, it's really exciting, and then you have to get actually to the hard work of figuring out what the hell the contract is going to look like. And that's tricky, because it was especially tricky with us, because if you're establishing what's called a first contract for a union is typically like the first contract of any union in a place. So if a bunch of public schools in a town, the teachers decide they want to unionize, that might be the first contract for them. And that's their first contract, but it might be their first contract with the town that they're establishing the union in, but it's not a first contract of teachers, right? It's their first contract, so they have to go through a first contract negotiation, but they have dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of other contracts as precedent to utilize to negotiate their union contract.
Sure.
Architects, there's no first contract for us to look at anywhere.
Hmm.
So not only are we negotiating a first contract at the practice, we're actually negotiating a first contract in an industry. So
It's
you can go
crazy.
online in New York City and you can see all the police officers, sanitation workers, teacher. You can see all the contracts. If the university that you're working at decides to unionize faculty, you can go look at another union faculty union's contract and say, this is where we want to start. Let's start talking. So we had to negotiate a first ever contract, not a first contract for an
Yeah.
industry. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other level of what the fuck kind of complexity. So are there attorneys present? I had no interest in having attorneys present for a couple reasons. One, bluntly, financially, they're very
Yeah.
expensive,
Expensive.
and sure they're smart. I had an excellent attorney advising me. I he gave me great advice. He didn't tell me not to do something. He only asked me questions about why and things like that. So I got some excellent attorney's advice, but I didn't want him negotiating a contract also because he had never negotiated a first ever architect's contract. He
Yeah.
didn't know art. He didn't know, like, I would have had to spend literally days or hours just trying to walk him through what the hell an
Yeah.
architectural practice is. And it just seemed like starting the process with an intermediary was in a place where we were trying to establish a first ever contract was contradictory to the desires of the process.
Mhm.
So no, there were no attorneys present. A really great guy, David DiMaria. He is at IAMAW. So he was the union representative for the BA union. And I think David was an attorney himself or trained as an attorney, but he works now at IAMAW. David suggested a method of bargaining called interest-based bargaining. And it sounded immediately interesting. So it was a way to negotiate and write a first contract by establishing first all of the quote unquote interests that each party had. And it was a way of negotiating that was much more, I think, intimate and connective,
Hmm.
and not arm's length using intermediaries.
Hmm.
So we decided when we learned about interest-based bargaining that we first had to learn how to negotiate. So there were a lot of steps here, David. So
I think
we
it's so
like,
funny that it's a sort of there's some humor or something comical about there are these two sides, right?
yeah,
In a certain sense, but you're both also in the same boat trying to
right.
figure out how this works.
That concept of two sides is actually quite important. So one of the most interesting things about IBB was that we learned that there is a real spatial component to the concept of negotiation, right? So there's the catchphrase or the idea of sitting across the table from somebody, right?
Right.
And there's the cinematic exchange of, here's a piece of paper with what I want, and you slide it
You
across the
slide
table,
it over. Yeah.
right? Slide it
Yeah.
over the table, and
Yeah.
then the person looks at it and they crumple it up into a ball and they throw it in the corner and they lob some expletives at you, and then, or they like write something down that the camera can't see and they slide it back across the table to the other person, right? So there's people across the table from each other. Well, we were trained by an outfit called the FMCS. So David DiMaria said, well, look, we want to learn about IBB. We should consider it. If we're going to consider it, we should get trained in how to negotiate.
Wow.
And so the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services was brought in. This is part of the Labor Department, and it's a federal office, which may have been gutted by the creeps gutting our government.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a couple of people to come out, one from Long Island, one from Cincinnati, really great people to help us learn how to negotiate and to walk us through the process of interest-based bargaining. What's also kind of funny is that the FMCS is what it sounds like. It's the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services. So they're brought in typically when negotiations have gone awry, right? They're
Right.
conciliators. They're there to help bridge gaps. They're there to help people go from sitting across the table in a kind of antagonistic environment to working through differences and reaching consensus, right? That's their job, is to help conciliate. So they were brought in because they know how to teach interest-based bargaining, which is typically not done on at the beginning of a process, but done when things go sideways.
Right.
And so they came in and they did like 3 days of training with us, or 4 days over the course of a few weeks. And we're kind of like, I think looked at us kind of confusedly, like, why are you guys, like, you guys seem to get along. Why are you using mediators? Like, but it was great. They were so helpful because we didn't know what we were doing. So when we got to, like, they would watch us for the first couple of days of negotiation and they would say, like, well, here's what you have to pause here because you're getting ahead of yourself and you have to go back and start to talk about the issues, right? So interest-based bargaining is you first set out all the interests. So an interest could be something like hybrid work environment.
Okay.
Like or the interest is actually healthy workplace, right?
Okay.
The interest is we want a healthy workplace. So what are the means by which you have a healthy workplace? Well, one person might say, like, I need the fastest computer.
Right.
Which then gets put in a separate bucket. From someone might say, I don't want to ever have to sit in a desk inside an office space, which gets put into another bucket. And so you have to set out all these interests of what are you negotiating, what's contractual, what's not contractual. So FMCS helped us understand how to do that. And what it goes back to is the spatial condition, which is that you don't sit across the table from each other. It's literal. You sit around the table. You sit around a table. We would sit around a table, and it wouldn't be 4 people on this end of the table and 4 people on this side of the square, half on each square, on each part of the square. It was, I would sit next to Chris Beck, who was part of the labor unit, who would sit next to Will, who's a principal, who would sit next to Anne, who's in the unit. We'd just sit wherever we wanted and talk through these things and work through the interests and start to develop all the parameters for the things that would go into the contract before we developed contractual language that would spell out the actual contract itself.
And now a little break for our show sponsors. Are you tired of juggling multiple pieces of software and struggling with spreadsheets that aren't made for the realities of design and architecture in 2023? Built by and for designers and architects, Programma's all-in-one suite of tools has everything modern studios need for every stage of a project. Mood boards, the world's best specification tools, procurement tracking, project management, and more. All smartly integrated, easily shareable, and always up to date, reducing time-consuming double handling and costly errors. Share your work in various formats, from PDF to client-friendly, up-to-date online dashboards. Join the ranks of leading studios using Programma today. Click the Programma link in our show notes to start for free. This episode is brought to you by Chaos. They make award-winning design and visualization tools, and they're really pushing the boundaries with AI. Now, AI is shaking up the architecture and design world, and Chaos is taking a responsible approach. Their tools are built to help architects, designers, and visualization specialists to work faster and explore more ideas without replacing creativity. Basically, Chaos wants AI to make your imagination stronger, not take over. So you get to design with more freedom, create stunning visuals, and stay in control of your work. If you want to see what that looks like, tap the Chaos link in our show notes.
This might sound arrogant to people who are not architects, but do you think that because you're all architects, it allowed you to negotiate more successfully and better? Because I find, as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, we're kind of trained, and if we learn, hopefully, through school, to learn how to be very rational when we're presenting, to think things through rationally, to start with an idea and explain it, and then to parse out information and just work through conversations and in a certain way negotiations, but in the context of designing architecture, sort of in that way. Do you think that, like, helps give you guys a leg up compared to, I don't know, if you didn't have that training collectively?
My initial answer was no. Like, I don't think that gave us an advantage.
Interesting.
That's my first, I was thinking through while you're asking, like, the answer is no, because architects have tried this and it didn't work, right?
Fair.
There was like a high profile failure of, they're all architects. It didn't work.
That's true.
The management said no. They divided the labor force. It failed, right? It's happened a few times. Mm-hmm. So I think that the answer at the highest level is no. Architects and our education and how we think about space and how we think about collaboration, I don't think it gives us any kind of advantage until you find people who have shared interests, right? Mm. And those interests may be shared in the center of the Venn diagram. They're not all the same. It's not two overlapping circles, right? It's as long as you have people who have enough shared interests and they have what you're describing, David, I think once you have that, then yes, the answer goes from no to yes.
Yeah.
And we had enough people and we had enough shared consensual interest in certain parts of this process to make that sense of criticality and collaboration supportive of the process.
Yep.
So I do think, so the answer went from no to yes, but I think it has to do very much with where the interests of all the people involved land.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you're at the table together, making concerted effort, that's where it kicks in. But if you're not going to be at the table, then
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So is there a next step after that? I mean, I imagine training the CBA has got to take a long time or get to terms, or,
So we started training in, I think it was February of 23. And so it took us a while from the recognition, which was in the late summer of 22. It took us from then until February to get through how are we going to negotiate, we had to go back as management and as the union to talk about like where the interests lie before we talk together about where the interests lie. We talked to IMAW and the BA union about the method of negotiation. We talked to FMCS about scheduling training. We reached consensus on that reasonably quickly, but we still had to schedule them. We had to go through the training. We started negotiation March, April of 23, and we signed the contract. The contract was ratified, for the around the following July. So it took almost 14 months to negotiate the contract.
Wow.
And that happened. So it happened during work hours. We never met outside of work hours. This is actually an important, both symbolic and practical part of this, was that we weren't asking, nor were any of us, including me, interested in doing this like late at night, as extracurricular activity, overtime. No, we do this as part of our work.
Yeah.
So we carved out time, which made it take longer because we couldn't just spend a month not working on projects. So it meant that we would meet for a day or two, and then we might come back in 2 weeks and we would do some work separately.
Yeah.
We worked on a shared Miro, online Miro board, where we would dump everything. We had solved this great, huge, sort of messy Miro board where you would first lay out interests, then you would start to describe what would be in the contract. Then you would all together decide about feasibility of certain proposals. So you would then develop proposals from the interests. And then you might develop for one example, hours of work, right? So one of the big questions was how many hours are in a work week, right? 40-hour work week. During the pandemic, we had actually gone down to a 38-hour work week because we did summer Fridays in the pandemic, but then we just never stopped doing summer Fridays. So Friday ended at work ended at 3 or 4 o'clock on Friday, every Friday. And then it just kept going after the pandemic. So we had sort of a natural 38-hour work week, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got to the negotiations about a work week, we were talking about where do you work? So work week ties into so many issues. Where do you work? Are you in office? Are you hybrid? Are you remote? because we were doing this relatively proximate to the kind of, I don't want to say the end of, but the kind of waning impact of the work styles of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there's like, where do you work? There's hours of work. Like, we didn't work 40 hours before. We had like a comp time policy, but no formal like overtime policy. So like, what constitutes a work week? Where do you work? Like, everyone was working at home. Very few people were still back in the office. We had never really established a return to work policy either. Like, you should be here 2 days sitting at your desk. Like, there was no, we never dealt with it throughout the pandemic, post-pandemic, until we got to negotiations. So we had to have discussions about that. So like, you'd have like a discussion about workplace, hybridity, remoteness. We have an employee in California. We have an employee in Boston. We have an employee in New Haven. There were questions about like, well, if someone's not required to be in the office because they live in California, why is someone in Brooklyn required to be in the office, even if the office is in Brooklyn? Like, where's the equity in that? If someone is able to work at home over there, can't they work at home here? Like, why? That's like a little bit of a strange situation, right? So these are all discussions that we had about like what makes a healthy, collaborative, hybridized office that provides equity. So different proposals, like, were there days where you would have to be here? We ultimately like went through all the interest and all the proposals and decided that no one was ever required to be in the office ever, unless we as management decided that it was essential and was reasonable.
Right.
Which in 2 years now since the ratification, there've only been a couple of times where like, if everyone can come in for a meeting, that would be great. And it's only happened like twice, and it was not project related. It's just like, can we get together?
Right.
There were hours of work. So there was the 40-hour work week. There was an initial proposal from the union was to go to a 4-day work week. And there was a discussion about that because that's complicated, right? Not because any of us are uninterested in a 4-day work week, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
Like my own desire is like, sure, let's do a 4-day work week. That would be, I would love to be able to do a 4-day work week. Like, yeah, like there are lots of studies, and we talked about those, and we read those studies that were presented to us about the benefits of health, productivity measurements, et cetera, about a 4-day work week, right? But the reality is that architecture, construction, and allied consultants are not on a 4-day work week. Job sites, especially construction, do not work on 4-day work weeks. So how do you acknowledge the benefits of flexibility, maybe a more compacted work week? How do you rectify that with what our industry expects, what our clients expect, and what our work sites, especially with projects under construction, might demand of an architect? So we went through proposals, and there were financial ramifications for a 32-hour work week. If it's a true 4-day work week, it wasn't a 4-day, 10-hour day work week, because that's also that gets extreme on people's health. So a true 4-day work week means effectively 4 8-hour days. Yeah. But that means that one day is not covered. So what happens if we're open Monday to Thursday, but then Friday on a construction site, or there's a city meeting? Like, how do you deal with all the issues? So we had discussions about how to work that. What we ended up on was we reached an understanding consensus, and everything had to be reached by consensus. It wasn't like you had to have, in interest-based bargaining, you have to have consensus, which means if someone says no to something, you keep talking. So it could be 7 of us are yes to something and one person is no. You don't advance a policy in the contract until that no turns into an okay. It doesn't have to be a yes,
right?
But it can't be a no.
Interesting.
So we went through a whole bunch of these proposals. We ended up reaching consensus on a 36-hour work week. So we have a 36-hour work week.
Okay.
We have a 5-day schedule.
Yeah.
So effectively, people work 7.25 hours a week, approximately. However, the contract spells out flexibility, which is that with approval, if someone says, hey, this week I want to work my 36 hours in 4 days because I need Friday for whatever reason, whether it's to take care of a child or to go away or because they're tired, they want a day off, not as PTO, but they just need some space, right? Who knows what the reasons are? We agreed that that would provide, we're always open 5 days a week with prior approval and communication with managers and teammates. You're allowed to do that with approval in 4 days if you want.
That makes sense.
Hey, well, it works. No problem. Right? I could work 10 hours one day, 10 hours the next day, 8 hours, 6 hours for it, whatever the adds up to the 36 hours. Right. As long as my teammates know, as long as I'm communicating, and as long as we're like effectively, it implies and it requires support from each other. It means that job sites are covered, right? So if we have a construction site and someone's like, I'm going to be working a 4-day week, it means that others who are involved in that know that Friday they shouldn't take the day off.
Right.
It's just communication.
And it's interesting because some of the things you're describing, and a lot of others that I'm kind of visualizing, they sort of naturally happen in smaller practices, but they're just not formalized.
Right. So
it also, it kind of is a bad thing sometimes because it creates a lot of confusion and then a sense of unfairness. Totally. Right.
But I think to that first part of not being formalized, I think that goes again back to your very beginning question about like why is it necessary? And it's because none of these things are formalized. So you could say, like, as the boss, I could say, here's our policy. I'm going to change our office handbook, right? And I'm going to say, this is our new policy, 5-day work week, 36 hours. Great. That's good. Okay. That's super. That would be a progress. That would be a progressive move and really great for the employees. But without a contract, it doesn't have any weight. I could change it tomorrow. I could just change it back.
Right.
And I could also terminate somebody if they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because they're at-will employees. So without the contract, it's all great. Like, yes, it's good. More people who aren't unionized should be doing some of these things, like without a question, because there aren't going to be unions in every architecture firm. There's only 2 of us, right?
Oh, there's 2? I didn't know there's another.
2. Yeah, Sage and another firm in New York, Sage and Coon, which is about 13 people. They ratified their contract, I think, about 2 months ago. So there's 2 of us, right? So I'm not deluded. This isn't running amok amongst the architecture industry. There aren't going to be dozens and dozens of architectural unions, though I wish there were. Many other firms should institute some of these practices for the health and welfare of their employees and their own health and welfare. But frankly, them instituting that and adopting these policies does not create any security for the labor force. Mm-hmm. The only thing that creates security and certainty for the labor force is the contractual obligation that the CBA establishes. So that's why the union is important.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and it does clarify things. So once the contract, I'm zooming forward now. So once the contract is made, how can it be changed?
It can be changed by addendum, which is through mutual change. It can be changed upon renegotiation. We're coming up on the 3rd year, so our contract expires next April 30th. Mm-hmm. So we'll probably begin renegotiating the contract starting sometime, I think, late summer, early fall. And hopefully it's sort of on the margins where things get negotiated, because most of it seems to be working well. But we realized kind of quickly that we didn't consider, like, it's like 32 pages or something. And there are some things in there that we didn't actually even talk about, or that we didn't consider. Like we have the flexibility for people to go to, partial schedules. Like people might want to go from full-time to 60% full-time, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're beyond like a parental leave or a family leave, right? They just might be like, you know what, I really want to teach, so can I still work here? Like, is it okay if I did 60%, but I need the other hours to teach? Mm-hmm. Right? So, and that's the kind of stuff that I actually think is really important for us to do, mm-hmm. Is to provide that opportunity. One, because I teach. So if like I was like, you can't teach, that's kind of hypocritical. Yeah. It's like, like, no, you can't do what I do. That's sort of, maybe that's like an originary sin of architects, is to not permit their employees to do what they themselves are doing. It's hypocrisy. But and part of it is like, actually, I think some owners think of that as an affront or selfishness on the part of their employee to say, like, can I go to 60% so I can teach? When in fact, actually, what it was doing is it's creating goodwill, it's maintaining continuity, right? Institutional knowledge. It's expanding their own knowledge base because they're both teaching and learning from their students. They're actually promoting the practice by being part of an academy and also part of your practice, right? So that was in our contract that could be done, but we didn't actually ever connect that to like PTO policy, right? Like if you go to part-time, does your PTO get proportionally allocated? Like, do you get the same amount of days off if you're working 60%, if you're working 100%?
Right.
Like, we never even, we were so like consumed with writing this first contract, we never thought about any of those interconnected, or not any, but some of those interconnected things.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't think about that. So the next contract negotiation, we're starting to, like, I think both the union and management, were starting to like make lists of the things that there were basically gaps in, and it's not about trying to claw back things on ownership side. It's like someone will ask about something and we're like, oh, we don't have an answer. The contract doesn't actually deal with that. We need to write something about that.
And you said the contract lasts for three years?
It was that was the recommendation, was like that you do the first period for 3 years, because 2 years is over fast, which we just passed 2 years and it went by really fast.
Yeah.
And then 3 years gives you like a little bit of runway to start the understanding of what might renegotiated. And then 4 years is kind of long because it was a first contract. So like any gaps. So 3 years was recommended, and it has gone by really fast. And it's we have some things to address, but it's mostly that kind of gap filling in my mind. In the next couple of months, as we talk about it, someone might be like, oh, we should talk about this. And it might be a whole new issue that we actually never even thought about.
Sure.
But we haven't gotten to that point yet.
So how has from your lens, how does the studio change since all this has been established? Does it seem happier and brighter? Does it seem awkward because there is this division? Did you guys have that awkwardness and then you moved past it? Like, how has it been through?
There are some things which have for me, again, it would be great to talk to labor because their position will be fundamentally different than mine. Right?
Yeah, we can do that.
So I can only speak from my own perspective, which is that for me, a lot has remained the same, right? We had a healthy, collaborative, supportive workplace before. We still have that. From my standpoint, some things that have changed, and I think significantly, is that I started to be more comfortable with a level of transparency that I wasn't previously. I have regular monthly updates. We do regular monthly office meetings, where I try to update everyone on like the work pipeline, which again sounds kind of silly. Like, how can you not tell your employees like where the work's coming from?
Yeah,
but I didn't do it.
A lot of offices don't.
I didn't do it for a long time. Yeah. And now every month when we meet, I explain like, here's what we sent proposals out for. Here's who contacted us, because they should know like what does the landscape look like. And also sometimes it's been telling them bad news, like, which is like, this project is stopped. This project is stopped. This means this. This means this. This is what our year looked like last year. Stuff I didn't do previously with any kind of level of disclosure that I've learned how to do. So I think that's helpful in creating some trust that may have been there, but not at a level of intensity that it is now, but also trust about certain issues that didn't exist at all before because I wasn't talking about certain things. I think our office environment I think we're learning still how to be this hybridized, because we're pretty much in the office only when you want to be. We have a physical office in Brooklyn. I'm here pretty frequently because I like to be at the office. I use it as a way station between here and teaching. So geographically, it's kind of midpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I like seeing people. We share the office with a really great graphic designer, so I get to see people from their practice. On any given day, there might be me here. Today was just me. But yesterday there were 5 people here. Again, we're only 15 and 3 people are remote. So there were 12 people in New York. So on a really, really crazy day, there might be 5 or 6 people here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we're still learning about the kind of in the office environment, and the transformation from sort of post-pandemic to now. I think the office has remained quite stable, right? So I think that's an indication of a healthy workplace in some ways. People, I think, are content to continue working here. It's helped me figure out how to market the practice more robustly.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't say that just like from a financial standpoint, but it's one of those things where like I think the formality of the contract has like it's not a shadow weight, it's like a real weight. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is a contract. Like it means I always felt a lot of pressure and an obligation to be supportive of my employees previously before the union. It wasn't like that didn't exist and I was kind of aloof about it. But I really do think that having the contract formalizes the obligation of the business to its employees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important, actually. And so I don't feel more pressure from that, but I feel more aware of the obligation.
Mm.
So from my standpoint, those are some changes. And I will say for me, and this is hard to explain, it's owning a business, owning an architecture firm is pretty brutal. You know the deal, right? Like
Yeah.
there is a lot of pressure because you're making payroll and you're providing benefits and all those things financially. So there's a lot of pressure. But since this happened, my mental health has improved markedly. Like,
Interesting.
yeah. So, I was in partnership for 15 years. I had my own practice without the union for 10 years. So for 25 years in more conventional small practice environment, having been through at least 2 recessions and a pandemic and dealing with the struggles of that, balancing teaching and practicing since the union was formed and becoming more comfortable in transparency and having other people in management to work with together collaboratively on how to make the practice chug along well. My own level of stress, still high, is much more manageable, and I would say that I'm a much happier person from it. And I was always a pretty happy person, but I'm happier because of it.
And is that also because, you mentioned having X number of managers,
Mm-hmm.
which help you work through things, but also what I'm visualizing is that if you're a person who cares about people, which you are, that now you know exactly, and you've agreed upon terms with employees in a formal way, so there's no guesswork. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think for people who care about others, you're always a little bit wondering, like, do they really feel that way? Are they okay, even though they seem okay? And that, multiplied over 20 people or whatever people, it does create a level of I guess stress would be the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's like, I can't speak for the union members, but like they're a collective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're a collective. They work with and for each other.
Mm.
And that can't help but inform how we in management should work too. So normally you might think that examples are set by leadership, right? Like that's the, you look to the leaders to model behavior or model practice.
Right.
But actually, maybe we in management and ownership should be looking to the workers for the model of how to practice and behave.
Right.
And
If they
think
have
that's
their
been
shit
really,
together, then
right. No, that's right. And
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. Again, I think it's something that our academic world and our professional world are way behind on. Way behind still.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a lot of there's many benefits to all of this, but one of them is just bringing the things that we all know and think about, but to the surface. So finally there's an honest conversation, and then it can translate into something formal. It's interesting because there is a lot of unspoken challenges or requests or wants or interests and whatever else in the professional setting, but also in the academic setting. And it's just not, sometimes it's not talked about. Actually, a lot of times it's not talked about directly.
Yeah, it's tacitly accepted, just
the
way it is.
Has any of this shaped or changed how you guys do your work? So I'm not talking about like the workplace and the days off and the culture, but like the work itself. I don't know how you negotiate with clients, how you design things, how you talk to each other at the design table.
Yeah, I think it's made us. I think. Okay, I'll speak for myself.
Sure.
I'd say it hasn't been a sea change, because I fancied myself a reasonably decent listener prior. I think it has made us. I think it's made things more collaborative. I think there's a willingness to listen to each other in a way that is healthy. But I never had a practice like the stereotypical practice where like the architect walks up to the desk, she or he makes a sketch, leaves it for someone else to figure out what the fuck they drew. Like that's just not how it works. It's just like TV bullshit, or it's either TV bullshit or it's the rarefied air of a couple of obnoxious practitioners, right? And we work on big projects with big teams where we have to wrestle with each other and think things through, and we have to work collaboratively. If anyone wants to work as a individualist, it's probably not going to work well in a project where there might be 30 or 40 people involved. That doesn't mean people can't have their own ideas. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that it's really more strengthened what were the ways that we already were, rather than be transformative in terms of like day-to-day work practices.
Yep.
Because we're still an architecture firm, we still draw in Revit, we still, crank out a bunch of different iterations in Inkscape to look at and decide what materials to use. Like there's still convention to what architects do and how we draw and how we work, which hasn't fundamentally changed. So I don't want to overstate that, but I think it's strengthened more than transformed how we work.
Yep. And then sort of the same question, has any of this impacted the academic side of things? I don't know. It could be either like your studios you teach, or the school, or I don't know, whatever else.
So the school is interesting because schools are big places, right? I teach 3 classes a year, 2 studios and typically a seminar. And, we're a small school, but there still may be, like in the undergraduate program across the 3 years, there might be 3, 6, 9 studio sections across the 3 years. I'm teaching one of them, right? So like the question of impact is a good one. And there's all sorts of institutional and educational habits that teachers have of all different ages about how they run studios. But like one thing I've learned is the students, you learn how to work in a practice when you're learning in school, which is why it took me like 25 years to figure out that I was doing some things incorrectly and without enough care for the health of the people I was teaching. Right. So I went through school in the early 90s and I was so happy to, pull all-nighters, like badge of honor.
Yeah.
It's not bullshit. It's like I did it. I liked it. I will not revise history and say I didn't enjoy that, because I did enjoy it. Like, I found it kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right. I also did not treat myself well at all doing that. Like, I was unhealthy because of it. I told my daughter, she just finished her first year of college last week or 2 weeks ago. And I said, she got sick. And I was like, that's because you were working so hard. Like, that always happened to me at the end of every semester. I would finish the semester, final reviews. And then as soon as the semester ended, I would get really sick for 3 or 4 days. Happened probably 4 or 5 of the 6 semesters when I was in school. And it was because my body just didn't handle it. I stopped moving and the body just got flummoxed by that. And then I started teaching, and I think I'm a humane teacher, but I never really talked to my students about how many hours they worked on their projects. And I would give them lists of drawings to do. This is for decades, right? For 20 something years, do these drawings. And if they didn't finish a drawing, I never took them to task for it. That was where my humanity came in, was that if someone didn't finish the drawing list, I didn't chastise them. Right. I didn't make them feel bad. I would never insult my students ever at a review, ever, even from the start. But I didn't think, hey, maybe I should not assign so much to them. Right. I never thought about the scale of a building project and their knowledge level. Was it appropriate for what they're learning? I should have done these things. These sound like common sense things that teachers should do, but I didn't, because my teachers didn't do it with me. And I love my teachers. I loved my teachers. I had great teachers, but I never thought about that side of things. So in the last few years, I started to ask some questions. I actually asked the director of the program 3 years ago. I said, hey, how many hours of work are students supposed to do outside of class? What's the requirement under accreditation for how many hours they're supposed to do to fulfill their assignments? I never asked that question before. Is that a crazy question not asked? So I got the answer of in a 12-hour studio, you do X, you have to be able to satisfactorily fulfill an assignment in X hours of work. I have to look at my syllabus. It was like a 12-hour studio. I think it was 12 hours outside of class.
Wow. That's an efficient student. Jeez.
Well, right. So but that's not what they are. That's not what either you expect them to do or what an assignment might take, but it's what they should be able to do to complete an assignment. Yes. To a passable level. Yeah. It's not what would an A+ student do, but it's that's for undergraduates. And I was I asked the students the first day, I got that information, and I was like, how many of you guys know what the learning envelope is for this class? It was the true learning envelope. Nobody knew it. Yeah. I was like, do you know how many hours you're supposed to put in to finish an assignment? And nobody knew it. I hadn't even known it. So now I go through that with all my students, and I tell them explicitly, I'm going to write an assignment, because I write pretty much new assignments every semester. I don't repeat studios. I try to repeat classes and assignments. I said, if you're finding that this is taking too long to just get through what I'm asking of you at the basic level, please tell me so I can adjust the assignment. That's one thing, which I never do. 2 is I tell them I don't ever want them pulling an all-nighter, ever. I don't want them doing it. I can't police it. I can't punish them if they do. I said, but I don't want them doing it. I said, I know school is hard, and I can't control what your other teachers assign you. So your time management is subject to things that are completely out of my control. But for my class, I don't want that to be driving you to these moments of stress and difficulty. So communicate with me. And my students still occasionally pull all-nighters. I'm not naive to this. I've seen some very tired students, but I'm hoping that it is rare and that it's for reasons of their being driven to do something that is outside of what I've ever asked them to do, even implicitly, like they think I want something because I'm passive aggressively saying you should try this. Like, I have to be very careful about not doing that.
Yeah.
Some of the students have expressed appreciation to me for that. And what I think it's doing, in concert with them knowing about my practice, is that they know that they are entitled to a healthy environment.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Full stop. That's it. And I hope it makes them question maybe what some of the other faculty are doing with them and assigning them. But I think that's the biggest struggle, is seeing that there are still environments that are created that are not healthy, and that there isn't really, I don't think that there's like an overarching desire to change that. Not at the new school, but generally, because I go to other schools to sit on reviews. I think generally there's still the idea that architecture school is what it is.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be that way, right? And that is
they should be leaving school having experienced a healthy environment where they're challenged and they're learning and it's intense and they are given freedom and encouraged to experiment and are working their butts off, but healthfully. They should be moving into the profession knowing that the profession is going to provide them a similar environment.
Yeah.
Not an abusive, unhealthy, exploitative, dehumanized environment.
Yeah. I love that.
So it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle. And again, I want to be careful. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't mean this to sound arrogant. Right. No, I don't mean to put myself on a pedestal.
Yeah.
I just know from seeing, like, okay, so here's an example. We have an overtime policy in our contract. You can't work overtime unless you request it. Right? That's to protect the worker, right? To protect us too, because we have to we should be able to bill for overtime.
Yeah.
But because we have to compensate employees for overtime, we have to make sure that it's approvable before we do that, because we have to have the money to pay it, right?
Yeah.
So we work on big projects. We have developer clients. We're doing large-scale affordable housing. We're doing private residences. We had, I think, one overtime request in the last calendar year.
That's amazing.
We're hitting our deadlines, right? So architects have to work 60-hour weeks. Please, you do not have to work 60-hour weeks. You just don't. You choose to do that, or you choose to ask your employees to do that, or you make your employees do that. But you do not need to do that to still do good work.
Yeah.
It's utter bullshit. So if architecture firm owners can understand that there's required discipline that helps provide a healthy environment, that actually makes the work better and focused, that helps them not work overtime and not have to ask clients for more money, what's the problem here?
Yeah. I agree. And I like your point as well, that this stems from school. If you're conditioned in school to do these crazy hours and to kill yourself and to please people who are kind of like assholes, then when you get into the workplace, when you experience that, you're like, this is normal. And when you, for myself, when I went to an office that didn't do that, I was like, this is weird. Oh my God,
they paid me to work. Like, I had just been in school paying to work this many hours. Now they're paying me.
Yeah.
My first job, I was like, sure, I'll stay late. I'm getting paid. I wasn't getting paid a lot, but I was getting paid.
Yeah.
I was conditioned. I was totally conditioned. And it wasn't like nefarious. It just was the way it was.
And I think you're right also that there's this tendency to, for those who want the profession and then the education to stay as it was, there's a tendency for the subject to be oversimplified and to be kind of like binary. Like the concern always is, well, if we don't do long nights, if we don't do all of these things, then the work is not good, right? And that's like, it's either this or that. Yeah. But not really. I mean, part of what you should be learning how to do when you're a student is learning how to be efficient with your time. Like, how is that not something you should be learning? But I mean, how many teachers have I seen in my career who are actually engaging students to try and help them be more efficient in working? It's just not really a subject that's talked about.
Yeah. Right.
And anyway, we burned through the time super quickly. Any closing thoughts or remarks before we wrap it up and continue on with the Friday?
Just thank you for talking to me. It's a fascinating. It's been a fascinating experience. It's like an ongoing experience for us. Like, I think the next sort of the next thing for me to continue to learn and understand also is like another topic for discussion, which is probably a long one, which is like, how does it impact the business side of things?
Ooh, yeah.
Like as we're understanding the shorter work week and flexibility and project workload and project scale, like how does it affect the business? I've found that so far the business is at the mercy of our industry, right? Like, do I have enough work or do I not have enough work? Not the union and the terms of the contract have had almost no, if not no impact on the business side of things. Like, we haven't lost any work because we were unionized. We've probably gotten a little bit of work because we're unionized, but like how much profit there is has more to do with like, are we busy or are we not busy?
Yeah, sure.
Like, that's it. Like are we were struggling for a bit because all of our projects were in CA.
Yeah.
Like, we had 4 buildings in CA at the same time, which was had a much bigger impact on the bottom line than any other issue, because we were fully employed and very busy, but you know what fee is like during CA. It's the least of the fee.
Yeah.
Right. So I think now that we're 2 years in the contract, I think the next 2 or 3 years, it'll be really interesting to find out more about the business side of things and where does it lead, both from a financial standpoint, but also from like a collective financial standpoint.
Yeah. Well, part 2.
Yeah.
in a little bit of time from now.
But yeah, thank you for talking to me about this. I hope more people open up their minds to what this can mean for themselves as owners or for their staff if they are the employer, and in particular related to really the health, welfare, and security, because that all makes our creative work stronger. Like, that's in the end what it does. That's what it does for us.
I love it. Well, thank you, Andy. Thanks for making the time and for the transparency and the honesty. I think folks are going to really enjoy this, and the conversations will continue.
Thanks, David.
If you're listening to the show and you like what we're doing, then please consider supporting us by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app. You can also find us on Spotify and YouTube. And we have an Instagram handle, which is Second Studio Pod. And we have about 90-something thousand people following. So join that. Leave comments on there. We post video clips, work images, quotes, announcements, all kinds of fun stuff. We also have a website, which is secondstudiopod.com, and a hotline. So if you have any guest suggestions or topics we should talk about, then you can text the hotline, which is 213-222-6950. Thanks everyone for listening. Lots of great stuff coming up, and we'll talk soon. Bye.